The next step for project 3 is to make a section perspective. I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino. Open up that file again. Let's see, make sure I pick the right one here. There we are. All right, and so there's several things you'll notice. One, I'm in parallel view, but I have this ground plane and this tile that I made for, or tile pattern I made on the ground plane from the plan view. But this is set to parallel. I'm going to go ahead and go to the viewport and set this to perspective. Okay, so go to the viewport label, set view, and set perspective. That way I can easily see this thing. Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to go through this outline really quickly, make sure I get everything ready. We're going to create a clipping plane in the perspective viewport, and I'm going to move it in position, pick the most interesting section perspective I can make. I'll save that view, which is really important. Then we'll cover or sort of, I guess, rehash these old things that you're getting used to now. You make 2D. Sorry, rendering with soft shadows and then compositing everything back in Illustrator. All right, so I'm going to go to toggle back to my 4 views at once. In my perspective view, I'm going to type in clipping plane. Okay. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze again. Oh. It's going to ask me to draw my clipping plane. I'm going to draw it in one of my side views, like right view. Okay. And I'm just going to click and click. There's my clipping plane. You can see it's showing up in perspective view. I'm going to go ahead and select my clipping plane. If for some reason it's not showing up in the right viewport or you need to change it, I can go to properties and go to the clipping plane properties, right? And then I can change the direction that it's clipping. I could also change which viewport it's displaying in. So I can make sure that I have perspective clicked on. So I can double click this, double check this. I'm going to go ahead and position my screen, tumble around. I'm going to sort of center this up vertically. I'm also going to use the gumball and just sort of move that clipping plane a bit until I get an interesting place here. I'm cutting through a curtain wall. I'm cutting through some vertical planes and some horizontal planes, so walls and floors. I'm showing some things in the background. Most importantly, I mean, you want some sort of spatial and volumetric variety, right? So I have some multi-story spaces here. You can see balconies overlooking other balconies. You can see that my floor plane extends out and the indoor space sort of flows to the outside. Now I'm just going to go ahead and try to center this up a bit. Center it vertically as well. So like, there's the amount of space here is about similar to the amount of space here. Okay. And I want to make sure that my ground plane extends all the way through my viewport. That's important. Okay. And okay, with that that looks pretty good. Let's just double check our checklist again. Positioning, move the clipping plane. Once I have that exactly where I want it, I'm going to save this view. Okay. It's really important because if I accidentally mess something up, I want to be able to go back to this view and do the make 2D or render and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go to my viewport label again. And back here where it says set view, and I can change, which view, which direction I'm looking from and at, and go all the way down to named views. And this brings up a box, and I have a save icon here, and I can click that. Now I'm just going to save the current view that I have on my screen, and I'm going to call this section perspective course test or something like that. I'm just going to name it so I know what it is. And hit OK. All right, now, if I accidentally move my view around and I get lost, I can always go back to the viewport label, go to set view. All of the views I've saved are now listed along with top, bottom, left, right, front, back, perspective, and isometric. So there it is, the section perspective course test. I'm going to go ahead and position that perfectly. There we are. All right. Last but not least, I'm going to render and I'm going to make a make 2D. So I'll go ahead and do the render first. I'm going to go ahead to the render properties over here on the right hand side. Make sure that it's set to render the viewport, that's the same size as my viewport. Quality set to good quality. I have transparent background on. I have the sun turned off. I have the skylight turned on. I'm going to go ahead and hit render. And this will take a minute or two. But once it's done, then I can save this as a PNG file. That's really important, especially for this one, because we want to maintain that transparent background so that all the sky, everything above the horizon will be transparent behind our model. That makes it a lot easier to add a sky and things like that in Photoshop next week later on when we talk about Photoshop and adding entourage and sort of blinging this thing out. So I'm just going to, this is almost done. It didn't take too long. 20 seconds left or so at the most. As soon as it's done, I'm going to go ahead and save. Again, just make sure that you save as a PNG file format so to preserve that, preserve the alpha channel. Let's see, almost there, almost there. And once we're done here, we'll also do the Make 2D and generate the line work that goes along with this. Just about there, look at that. Okay. As soon as it's gonna let me hit save, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna double check this, make sure it's set to PNG, and I'll call this section perspective course demo 01. All right, there we are. I've saved that rendering. I'm gonna be very careful to not move this viewport at all right? And I'm going to go ahead and type in Make 2D. I'm going to select from right to left and try to select everything in this model, okay? And hit enter. I'm going to look at these very carefully. I want to make sure that it's rendering the current viewport, right? Tangent edges, clipping plane intersections, I want to make sure that's on. Viewport rectangle, I want to make sure that's on. And I'm going to hit OK once I'm done. It'll go ahead and draw this perspective hidden line drawing for me, and it'll lay it out on the XY plane. So if I go back to top view, I can see this and I can move it away so I can look at it a little better. Go ahead and expand that top view. There it is. All right, and so now I'm just going to select that and export selected. And I'll call this section perspective course demo 01, and this will be an Illustrator file, so let's make that AI. There we are, and save. I'll go ahead and leave this as default and hit OK. All right. One last thing, I'm just going to save my Rhino file. Go ahead and close that. And lo and behold, here's my Illustrator. Just open that up. Illustrator apps open. Open up this new Illustrator file I made, right? First. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and change the size of my document. Edit artboards. And go to width, 17, height, 11. All right. Fit to screen. I'm going to select all this geometry all at once, go to transform, change its width to 17, and move it up to the top left corner. Give it a XY location of 0 and 0. All right, and then I'm going to go to my layers, which are already toggled on. Here they are. Add a new layer, drag that down at the bottom, call this underlay, and file, place. Let's place that rendering that we just made. I'm going to go ahead and transform that as well. It's way too large. Shrink that down to 17 inches in width, and then position that also at the 0, 0, top left-hand corner to be at the 0, 0 point of my document. We're almost done. I'm going to go ahead and lock this underlay layer, and I'm going to start to select, I'll also turn off this viewport rectangle layer. And I'm going to go ahead and select the clipping plane intersections, and I'm going to go and look at the palettes, color palettes. I'm going to make sure that the fill is set to nothing, to none, and the stroke is set to black. And then I'll go to the stroke panel and adjust the line weight. I'll use 0.75 for that, let's say, or maybe 1, I don't know. And I'm going to go back to the layers now. I'm going to select all the visible curves. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to the palette, make sure that there's no fill set, make sure that the lines, the stroke color is set to black. Go to the stroke panel and then change the line weights, and I'll set this to like 0.25. Let's see what that looks like now. Yeah, it doesn't look so bad. Yeah. And, you know, last but not least, maybe I don't want to have this edge right here, but I'll keep this horizon and I'll just move it to the edge. Move that one to the edge. All right. One last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to, as things pop up on my screen, I'm going to select all this stuff. Jesus, my phone's going off. And move this down a little bit, center it up a little more. And one last thing I'm going to do is, let's see here, I'll lock this, and maybe under like visible curves. No, actually I'll lock all these layers. I'll just make one more new layer here. I'll move it down underneath, over the overlay, but underneath everything else. Maybe over under the overlay as well. I'm just going to call this poche. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new shape using the pen tool. And I'm just going to try to click right there. And click right there. And then click to the bottom. And I'm just going to make a closed shape that I'm going to add a fill color to. Okay, so I'm going to go to the fill palette, turn that to black. Right. Go to the stroke, in this case, turn that off. All right, now I've added the poche, the black poche, to the ground as well. So now everything that's being cut should theoretically, right, mullions and glass, walls and floors, right, are pocheted in. Look at that. We have a section perspective. And that is the second part of Project 3.